welcome to White Women Wake Up, the podcast where two women from different generations have real conversations about culture, awakening to our cultural biases. I'm Karen.
And I'm Jonelle.
And we're here to explore how we as white women can learn, unlearn, and grow together without shame, just growth, waking up.
Waking up.
Hi, Jonelle.
Hi, how was your week?
My week was good. Yeah, a little, when you say good, it's always an interesting thing. It was, had its issues with students and people and so forth. But one of our topics was this language of kind of our white culture and assumptions and normative biases, like becoming from the majority culture. And I just really thought a lot about what we talked about and how one of my biggest issues is just not stopping and asking other people their perspective or how they would like to navigate a space or a situation. And so that was really raw last week when we started talking about your friends and having your friends over. And that just, gosh, it made me think, why didn't I just ask? Why didn't I ask instead of just assume that they're going to play the way I thought a kid should play? So anyways, that's me.
No, I love that. That actually leads us perfectly into my topic today.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Let me kind of start with an ideal scenario. And this is actually something that I tried really hard to incorporate into my last role. It was not always successful, but anyways. So here's the question. What if we, as white women, intentionally focus on amplifying the voices of people of color and women in leadership until their representation reached 1/3 in every room we're in? What if there's the key to real social justice movements wasn't just listening, but ensuring these voices hold enough power to shift the course of history?
Well, I can speak into that because I think I've tried to do that.
Great.
And I can talk to how I tried to do that.
Perfect.
But one of the big issues right now is we can't even begin to do that unless we've done our own work. And part of doing our own work is understanding, our white culture. And I think all the DEI efforts have, yes, maybe they forced us to do our work, but they're not a bad thing, and we've made them a bad thing.
Yeah.
So where do we want to begin with this topic?
Well, that's we can totally go into
how to increase those percentages or how to do it authentically?
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit kind of more context within it, but you did hit on something that I kind of want to talk about later is how we're demonizing the word DEI and these programs, and it's awful. So anyways, I totally agree that doing your work is the first thing, but the step can be a little bit easier for people who are just starting their work, and it's called the 1/3 rule. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't.
Yes,
okay.
I love this. So this is something that I learned about a couple years ago, and I had in the corporate space, and so it was created by Tina Tchen, I want to say her last name. I really hope I am horrible with pronouncing, so I don't know if it's right. But this was Michelle Obama's chief of staff. And her vision for the White House and for policy was to have at least 1/3 of the voices in the room be a female voice. And in her perspective was a meeting would not go on or policy would not be created unless 1/3 of the room was women or female voices. And because of that, it truly changed the perspective of what came out.
Yeah.
It added diverse perspectives. The other thing that she did, which was really empowering.
Work at home might be more fashionable.
What a thought.
Yeah.
The other thing that she did was also really empowering that I want to talk about is not only bring the 1/3 of the women in the room, make sure you have that place, but also uplift those voices. And so this is something that I really used to try to encourage my teams with at work is, so oftentimes we're in meetings and you go into a room and everyone wants their opinion spoken or heard or this, and you're talking over each other. And really, again, we're just the minorities fighting for a voice here. What she made sure is she created a space where you always had to uplift your female coworker's voice. And so, and I know people out there might be like, hey, I don't what if I don't agree with them?
Yeah.
There's still ways to uplift and say, hey, I like this part or I like this. And so it perpetuated the credibility
Yeah.
of these voices in the room. So anyways, that's kind of like
It's so interesting. It makes me feel good about something I do as a teacher.
Oh, what do you do?
So one of the things that I have the students do, because the vocabulary of design is a little abstract, before they talk in a group, I have them talk in small groups so that they can practice their language in their discussions, and then they bring it out in a big group. And inevitably, what happens is someone usually from that group will say, she said this, and I really liked this. And so they lift someone up naturally because they had a smaller shared conversation. Can we go back, though, to what you were first saying about getting diverse voices in every situation? One of the things that I learned early on as a kind of a leader is the notion of intention. And so I had to be really intentional, because what I first had to do is look around my own circle, and my own circle was predominantly white. And my own circle of peeps in my life were either white men or white women. And so naturally, I would naturally go to hire these white women or white men. And so what I started to do, and it feels kind of a little subversive, but it really helped me when I was at conferences and I was in public spaces or spaces in my professional world. I purposely didn't hang out with my peeps. I intentionally would go sit at tables, and sometimes I would never talk because I wasn't the majority. Other times I was included in the conversation, but I would purposely go outside of my space. And so, and because of that, I ended up meeting people with diverse backgrounds. And because I think the word meritocracy comes up all the time. Well, of course, if all I have is white friends, and male or female, and I know that they're qualified, I'm going to put them in the position. If I am not hanging out with any people from other backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and I'm, Black, brown, Latino, Asian, all different backgrounds, if I'm not hanging out with them, I don't even know whether they're qualified. If I'm not looking at their LinkedIn or their professional resumes, I don't even know that they're qualified. So being intentional in these spaces actually was really helpful, because it opened my dialogue to how smart most people are. A lot of people are, not just because they're white. And so that was one thing that I had to do as a leader. And because of that, my workplace became more diverse.
I love that. And this is exactly why I kind of bring it up. I think
there's more.
Oh.
But I don't want to be preachy. Go on.
No, I mean, you can talk more if you want.
The challenge is when the workplace culture doesn't then support it. So I was really doing a great job hiring a diverse faculty, and then my university started cutting DEI programs. My university, it is really challenging. And for those of you out there, I work for a Christian liberal arts university. And under the Christian guise, some of these programs have been cut. And because they've been cut, the university no longer becomes these institutions no longer become a safe space for people with diverse opinions. Well, or from diverse backgrounds. Let me say diverse backgrounds. So less and less, the faculty is less diverse.
Yeah.
And yet my students are really diverse. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And that's exactly what I was kind of going to talk about too, is I think I wanted to open this up as a topic because oftentimes I think as well-meaning white women, they're as we've talked about, there's so many different ways to get involved and to try to push the needle when it comes to social justice and diverse opinions. But I know a lot of people are out there thinking like, okay, well, I don't have the time or the power or things. And so this is something, and I think you brought up the great example of sitting with others, not sitting with your peeps, but
getting
sitting
to know
with
people's
others.
stories.
But I also think this is a great example of in the office place. But you brought up the hardest part is sometimes office culture does not allow for this. I've even had scenarios where at the same company, but two totally different departments, I had to run my diversity conversations from very two different perspectives because there was an audience in one that was ready to listen and have conversations and engage and be excited about it. And it was amazing what we could produce as a team when we had these discussions and we had these places. And then there was a team who felt like it was a chore. And so this is where talking about how this kind of seems to be the common theme with DEI right now as it's a chore.
It's enforced.
It's enforced. Yeah. It's interesting. I know we've heard from people some recently who have felt like, oh, I wish it was more of a pull system versus a push system. Like, I wish I could pull from it on my own versus it being pushed on me.
Yeah.
And I think...
Well, the reality is it needs to be embodied. And so if we could find, like we know in an example of embodiment is during the 2008 financial crisis, when many of the banks were let off the hook from owing money back, the CEOs still took the money. And so it wasn't embodied. It was a system that people still took from their own spaces. I don't know if that's a great example, but I do think if we were to, here's how to clarify that. If we were to voluntarily embody it, great, but we're not voluntarily, us white people aren't giving up our power.
Well, and I think what's really interesting there is, so I've done a lot in my career on usability and adaptability and processes and strategy. And so this might sound a little bit like business mechanical, but the only way to get people to adopt something is if there's a benefit for them.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, we know the benefits of this. We can see the long-term benefits from the humanity perspective, from just
diverse
cultural perspectives, the diverse opinions.
Oh my God, different ways of going about something.
Totally.
Yeah.
But not everyone can see that. And so the cultures that I've seen that have done a better job of adopting, outside of the leadership being very full force, is also showing benefits to the team members. And so examples of benefits are, I worked at a large retailer, and some of our benefits around listening to diverse opinions were actually better sales and stuff. And so again, it sounds like an awful mechanical thing, but that was a surge to help people get interested in DEI. And then once they were interested, we got to see all the additional benefits that come from actually being engaged with DEI programs. And so I speak to this because, again, I think slowly starting with the 1/3 rule and making sure your committees you're building, your teams you are building, at least 1/3 has a different perspective.
It sounds so awful, though. And also, I think when you talk about the 1/3 perspective, we want to hit on white feminism versus Black feminism, because I can get white women in my leadership space. Am I intentionally having racially diverse persons in that space?
Well, and I think you made a great point. I think it depends on your space. There are plenty of spaces that are all female. That doesn't mean it's a diverse space.
Yes.
Like, is it now female with people of color?
Yeah.
But there's also plenty of places where female in the boardroom would be a diverse voice to male voices. Yeah. For example, so what is her name? Why am I so bad with names? But one of Sheryl
It'll be
Sandberg.
in the blog. Janelle will be in the blog.
No, so I found it. So Sheryl Sandberg, who was one of Meta and Facebook's big leaders.
She wrote the book.
She was the one who did Lean In. Again, it's still from the purview of white.
Yeah, a lot of. There's been some contrast about that one. But go ahead.
100%. But so I'm not saying she's perfect, but she still brought a lot of feminine and diverse perspectives to uplifting females in a tech space.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating that now, just 2 years after she's left, Mark Zuckerberg is saying we need to infuse more masculinity in the workforce. And so it's showing that it's still this consistency.
I would love, this idea of masculinity in the workforce. I know a lot of masculine men that are not threatened by women in the workforce. And because it's such a language of fear as opposed to a language of, coming together. And so I want to talk about an example that you're speaking into. And this isn't, ethnic or racial diversity. This is more a diversity of style. So one of the things that I think, and I think this is white, I really do, a white cultural style in leadership is being able to be vocal, being able to be loud, being able to assert a certain point of opinion. And in that, there's that kind of normative leadership style. So I used to run a student organization where every year I had to have a different student run the organization. And because it's student run, I had to let go of my own ideas of how to run things. I just advised. And I had a year where someone was exactly what we're talking about. On target, I almost use words like smart and things like that seem positive, when in fact, this other style was just as smart and all these other things. But they were vocal, they were present, they were vocal, they were action-orientated. Help me out on this. What are some of these normative things we think of leaders? That was their style. Great. Everyone got it. Everyone was comfortable. No problem. The new person came in the next year, and this person was quiet. This person was slow. This person took time to hear. And honestly, my perception was it's going to be an interesting year. We're going to have real will this person be able to command that space of leadership? They did. Now, the other person did a great job. I don't want to condemn the other person, but this person that year was amazing. And I learned so much about, again, my perceived perspective on style. And I think style plays a big role in these leadership spaces, because someone that might be coming with a diverse style, or because of their ethnicity or something like that, we don't think that they're qualified.
Style, though, is still rooted in racism.
It is rooted. Yeah, it can be. But I'm just saying that I think that this is part of this we want people to be identical to who we are, and we think whoever we are is going to get that position.
Oh, I know, but I think it's funny that you said it's diversity in style. It's still rooted in racism.
Okay, unpack that a second.
So the loud, boisterous, commanding leader.
Yes, exactly. It is definitely a white culture.
Yes, is white culture, is white patriarchy of we're commanding the room. Where you are right, the quieterness, people do associate a little bit more with femininity, even though we've taught white women, especially culturally, to be forceful, to be aggressive, to be loud in the room, but listening and quiet and sitting back. And it's not to say, when I say masculinity and femininity, both men and female can be
fluid.
Either or. You can be very fluid in this. It's just traditional masculine roles versus feminine roles. And so, but it is interesting. So even saying diversity in style still is rooted around sexism and racism, because ultimately the style that we're used to commanding in the U.S. is rooted in white patriarchy. It's
Yeah.
rooted in that big, loud, commanding audience. And it's what we're used to. And unfortunately, it's what we're fallen trapped to in a lot of places as well.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it's so interesting you brought up that you were unsure of that person. I think because again,
and meritocracy, that word, and this person was amazing. In the end, they both were amazing. I don't want to discredit someone else in their style, but they were both amazing. And I'm so glad that this student got the position, and it taught me a big lesson.
Yeah.
And so back to your 1/3, it is about these. So one of the things you were saying that I think is really important is if we're no longer going to have these imposed DEI efforts, which just makes me sad. But if no longer these imposed DEI efforts, how then are we going to take responsibility to embody the DEI efforts?
Well, and this is exactly it. This is where it's now on us. Unfortunately, these corporations are not taking it on. And so it's now on the people within the corporations to keep doing these things, to keep uplifting, doing the 1/3 rule, uplifting 1/3 of diverse voices and truly letting them speak, moving them into positions of power. But again, easier said than done. When the corporate culture does not have your back behind it, it's easier said than done.
So can I give you another little sneaker?
Yeah.
So one of the things I had heard in some of my DEI training was this language of cues and clues. And now, this is generalized, and so our Black audience, please speak into this, is there are one of the ways that I've learned that a diverse audience navigates the world is through cues and clues. And so one way that you can demonstrate that you're a safe culture or a safe leader for diverse people is, what are the pictures that you have in the back of your office? Are they just of white people? Or do you have multiracial friends? So Jonelle and I were just on a national Zoom call with an organization for racial justice. And I noticed this white woman had a poster from W.E.B. Du Bois. And if you're Black, you know who W.E.B. Du Bois is because he did a lot of data graphics on the Black experience of America in 1900. That's a cue and clue. That's a clue to me that woman is doing some work. That woman is safe. So anyways, there's a lot of different ways that then we maybe again, one of the things I learned from our last podcast is maybe one way for me to even just be a safe leader is to simply say, this is my process, but what is your process? Do we need to do something differently so that we're all comfortable in this space?
Well, and I think it's so interesting you bring that up because though cues and clues, what is it?
Cues and clues
is more though about authenticity.
It is.
This is the slippery slope again with performative activism.
Yep.
So this is the slippery slope with performative activism.
But you and I don't need to find out if we go meet someone white, we don't need to find out whether they're safe. Someone who has been demeaned in this conversation, in this world of racism or sexism or transphobia, they need to find safe spaces.
Yeah,
how can we cue them in that it's safe?
100%. You jumped in before I was...
Sorry.
Before I was finishing. No, so what I was trying to say, though this is the caveat with performative activism versus authenticity, is cues and clues. I can see people wanting so badly to be a safe space that they build and develop a false sense of safety in the sense of having, posters, having the blue bracelets, having these things to show you're safe, but that's not authentic. Yeah. I see what you're saying here is the authenticity is truly having pictures of your friends that this diverse. Is who you are. This is who you're diverse. Truly enjoying an artist because you enjoy an artist and what they stand for and their values and honoring them. That is about diversity. So I think what's interesting there, I guess I'm trying to speak to, is for audience members who are still trying to find their path and wanting to show safety, show it in authentic basis. Don't just all of a sudden research someone or find a great book and then have that book out to speak to all the time.
But I have heard from in hiring situations, diverse hiring situations, persons that are entering into an office, those cues, like I know those cues make a difference. They do. And I think you're absolutely right. Where is that authenticity?
Yes.
And where are we making sure that our spaces are open to other people?
Yeah.
So I think that there's back to what we're saying, and I don't know what time we're at yet, but back to what we're saying about this third, increasing the third, because I love that you brought this up, bringing that back. It is more complicated than just saying, I'm going to have, I'm going to think about who's at the table, because it's also about making sure that we are not just, like, I heard this one quote that I thought was really interesting. Welcoming is like saying, you can come over and have tea. But when you're safe and you're at home somewhere, you take your shoes off and you go and grab your cup of tea. So where do we go beyond the just, you can come in and have tea versus you're really at home and you're safe? So I think that the thing is, doing that work to make that third authentic is kind of what we're getting at.
Exactly.
Yes, we need to be intentional. Yes, we need to go forward. How is it then authentic?
Exactly. And I think what I'm trying to get at, based on the third of what I'm saying, and then also the cues and why can I say that? Cues and clues.
Yeah.
The cues and clues that you're speaking to is so often, and I don't know if this is a white culture thing, a capitalist culture thing, we hear something and we want to do exactly that to fix the issue.
Yeah.
So then what someone could hear today is, okay, a third of the people in the room need to be a diverse audience. But it's beyond that kind of thing. It's actually genuinely taking into account their voices, taking into account their ideas, and not just tokenizing the idea. The same thing, I think, with the hues and clues. It's not just tokenizing and putting a stack of diverse books in your office that you may have never read, but you've heard they're good. And so it's this balance of, I know we're trying so hard and we want to do better every day, but making sure these things aren't checklists and making sure they're authentic to-dos.
Embodiment, that's the word.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it's going to take intention on each of our parts, because especially as companies are saying we no longer want to prioritize these conversations. We no longer want to prioritize really actively putting in diverse voices and in fact firing people because they and the thing is, meritocracy is such an awkward thing. We need to be so careful about that language, because most people are able to be in these, if they're going for the interview, they're undoubtedly qualified to begin with.
Well, exactly.
And they're being sourced out by their resumes and things.
Well, speaking of resumes, we only have a few minutes left, but it's such an interesting note too, is diversity within names on resumes. So my name, Jonelle, spelled with an O, actually tends to be more of a diverse name. And so I have done an experiment in the past, and I have just done J. Zimmerman or John Zimmerman, Jon, and within the same jobs. And my resume for John or J gets many more hits than Jonelle.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is a big one. This is a book that I would actually like us to read by Austin Channing Brown. Okay. And she is a Black woman. She's very prolific and very strong. And she talks about her name, Austin. Her parents were very intentional to name her Austin so that she could actually get into the job place. But it's caused so much strange reaction when she enters into these job interviews that she actually has to state, I'm a Black woman, which is so ridiculous, right? We think we're above and beyond that. Anyways, that might be a really great book club. I think the book, forgive me, I think it's titled I'm Still Here or something like that.
Great. We'll look it up and add it to our website.
Yeah, we'll add it as one of our sources.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today here on White Women Wake Up. We are so happy you sat with our intentional and raw conversations. We hope you learned something. Please, please, please leave us a comment. Click and subscribe onto all of our channels. You can find us at White Women Waked Up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.